Hey, it's Matt Pinfield. It's KLOS New and Approved, and I'm so excited to have my guest here tonight, and that is Slim Jim Phantom, who you know from many bands, but the Stray Cats, of course, is where I first discovered Slim Jim. And Jim, it's so great to see you, man.
Thanks, Matt. We talk about it for 40 years, and here we are.
It's incredible. You know, I love it. I mean, one of my favorite stories is discovering the band, because I would go and look for imports. I was really excited about the whole punk and new wave thing at that period of time. And, man, I got that Runaway Boy single, and I just went, wow, what is this? This is amazing. This is like, it was modern, but it was still had that classic thing going on with it. And I fell in love with that song. And then, got the singles and the first import album, which was different than the American, right? And you put out 2 albums there in the UK before.
Yep.
The American album came out as a combination, Built for Speed. But I got to see you guys at the Fast Lane in Asbury Park.
Okay.
And, man, you guys were just on fire, as you always were. And that was the night that Bruce Springsteen came up and did Fever with you guys.
Incredible, huh?
Yeah, that was amazing. Because usually he was down at the Pony, right? And a lot of the new wave and punk bands would play the Fast Lane. I mean, the Pony changed after a while and started to, accept more of different things. But I love the fact that he was such a big fan. And didn't you tell me a story once that he actually, walked home from?
Yeah. It was such a wacky experience. Of course, we left New York 1980, went to England.
I want to start from
there.
the beginning. You know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to go back even further because I want to talk about you growing up. I mean, you're born right in Brooklyn, but, you were raised in, was it Massapequa?
The 3 of us all went to school in Massapequa, which is about 47 minutes straight shot to Penn Station on the Express South Shore line that we all would take. So we all lived in Massapequa, went to school together, and all had bands.
You were different bands, all right? Because wasn't Brian in the Bloodless Pharaohs?
Yeah, Brian's 2 years ahead of us in school.
Yeah.
Which now, when someone's 99 and someone's 101, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But when you were 15 and someone's 17, that's when it was a big difference. And so Lee and I are in the same grade, Lee Rocker and myself, and we were always the rhythm section.
Yeah.
Bass and drums. And we practiced as a rhythm section for any of you kids out there trying to get ahead. For hours and untold hours at a time, just the bass and the drums.
Yeah.
You go boom and I'll go bop. You go boom, I'll go bop. Then I'll go ksh, and you go boom boom, and then I'll go boom, and then you'll go bop. And we just practiced as rhythm for years, and had bands. We were the guys that would play the school rec dance, or the keg party, or in someone's living room when their parents went to Europe, or we were those guys. So we fit in with every kind of tribal aspects of suburban schools, really, because we were just the guys in the band. And I think I was about 18. We had known Brian our whole lives because his brother was in class with us, and we just knew all the people who played. And but at that time, everyone tends to stick with their own age in a funny way.
You do.
The
really do.
sophomores played together. That was Lee and me. The seniors were Brian and his gang. So eventually, when we were all out of high school, which I would have been 18, we were all looking for something different, and we found rockabilly music just through album geek exploration. If you had a Blind Faith record, you see a track by B. Holly. If you have a Beatles record, record, if you have a Beatles record, there's plenty of C. Perkins on those ones, and L. Williams, Larry Williams. Where there was the oldie station,
CBS FM, right?
That's right, 101.1, and I always liked the doo-wop classic. We always liked Blueberry Hill and Hound Dog and all that, but didn't really know exactly what it was besides being the oldies channel. So we were getting Eddie Cochran from The Who, the Rolling Stones were a great wealth of names that you didn't know who it was next to the title. They had a Buddy Holly where They Did Not Fade Away, and they had Bo Diddley. There was quite a few from the Stones too. And for me, I was just doing my exploration in the record store, trying to make it all work out. And then I happened upon Elvis Presley, the first record, the Sun Sessions. And that, for me, that was the exact moment that the earth stopped spinning for half a second, and everything totally came into focus, and I knew that's what to do with my life. I found some older photographs of Elvis Presley, and within 3 days probably of hearing That's All Right Mama, Blue Moon of Kentucky, I had completely transformed myself. I went to St. Mark's Place, New York City, took the train from the aforementioned
Trash and
Massapequa.
vaudeville, places like
Yeah,
that.
that was one of the joints. First, I went to Hair Power,
Yeah.
and I looked like Peter Frampton,
Yeah.
who's my pal. We love you, Pete.
Yeah.
And I had that kind of hair, cut it all off into to Elvis Presley's second album we were going for. By the time I found 2 albums, walked across the street to Trash and Vaudeville, got rid of my flares and got some baggy pants, and got rid of my Adidas and got some D-ring creepers. So now I've got baggy pants, some creepers, and I left my tennis shoes and my flares in the dressing room. Walked down to Cheap Jack's,
Yeah.
and I had a yellow Lacoste tennis shirt on.
Yeah.
I left that behind. I got a bowling shirt, black and white, and I had a windbreaker. I think I left that at Andy's Cheapies and got a fleck jacket like Ricky Ricardo would have had.
Yeah.
And that was me. And that's
Yeah.
how I went home. I took the train back, came back home, and that's what I was. And I was always a drummer. That's what I wanted to do. But from that moment on, if I had worked in a hardware store, or if I had become a school teacher or a librarian or a construction worker, that's what I would have looked like. Didn't matter. This is what I love, and this is what I do. Hopefully, you can make a living at music, but that still was a different head, you know.
Yeah.
And the other 2 had kind of discovered the same thing at the same time, because we were the musician guys in school. We were always looking for something, and we were always the ones that got dressed up a little bit too. If I had found an old hat that my uncle was given a Goodwill, I would take that, and somehow had some type of look. And we also loved rock and roll. When I found rockabilly music, the glue was there.
Yeah.
So
were you playing on a regular drum set until then?
Yeah.
So like at this point, that's when you change your drum.
I took
thing.
lessons from the music teacher in the town, and then I took lessons from a guy named Mousy Alexander. We love you, Mousy. R.I.P. He was a local jazz guy who had played with Benny Goodman and Dinah Washington, and I found him in the newspaper kind of thing. Drum lessons given. I would go to his house and take lessons. So we wanted to make it on some level in music, but then when I found rockabilly, and most of my background playing along with records, what I could do, I could play the blues and I could swing a little bit, and some jazz records, so that I could relate to. So when I found rockabilly music, it was within something I could do, because I would take lessons and then go into the city and see Tony Williams or Lenny White or Alphonse Mauzon or someone play at the Village Gate, and these drummers were so beyond what I could comprehend.
Yeah.
That, well, I better go back and practice for 12 more hours and then hope that you meet some other guys who can play fusion.
Yeah.
I could never, or rock band. I never even really thought of it. I just thought of studying the drums at that point.
Talk about. Go ahead.
So when we met the other, we were around the other 2. They were both finding out the same thing at the same time, because rockabilly music, you got to know how to swing and you got to know how to shuffle, and you have to have some type of musical prowess because it's jazz and country based, which you got to have some chops to do it. There ain't no 4 on the floor and ain't no bar chords. I mean, you got to be able to kind of play a little bit. And what was happening is that we loved it so much, and we just started to hang out with each other, and Lee got a double bass. And we would just go to local bars and say, if you let us play here, we'll take the door and you take the bar money.
Yeah.
And we still had our serious bands that would go into New York City once a month and try to get a record deal, wait for someone to sign your serious band. And we would do what became the Stray Cats 4 or 5 nights a week at local non-music venues, because we loved the music so much. We played 4 sets a night. Eddie Cochran, Johnny Burnett, Gene Vincent, Carl Perkins, Buddy Holly. We knew every song because it was like every day you were learning all this stuff, going to thrift stores, going to record stores. Check out this belt I found. It's pink and black check. All right, well, that'll be great. I found this new record. Johnny Burnett. Excellent.
Yeah.
So we kind of lived that way. And what was happening was that, the once a month, your serious band have a few people and there was no record. But the Stray Cats would have, 100 people packed into these tiny bars. Not a rockabilly looking crowd. They were just people that loved us. We were maybe local eccentrics, and it rocked. It was very good. And that's when we were going through these album covers like they were some like talisman and touchstone for like the future, or like a path. just through these album covers. There was no Google, obviously, and all that stuff. Books of that on that.
No, you had to really do your research.
Hard to
and you
find.
had
The
go look
subjects
at
were hard to find.
records.
So it was basically album covers, which we would go to import places every now and again into the city and just really beat the bushes to find it. And these album covers became what you were basing your life on. And we had the Gene Vincent second album cover, and it's where Dickie Harrell is standing up.
Yeah.
Right? Jumping Jack Neal is there with the bass. Willie Williams is up there with the thrumming. Cliff Gallup, who it turned out that wasn't Cliff Gallup, that was Russell Wilford. Cliff Gallup was on the album, but he wasn't on the photo. How do you know these things? You don't until much, much later. So we thought, what about having the drums standing up like the Blue Caps? That's pretty cool. So we found an old drum kit from like the 40s or something and built a thing that we could stand up and play. Okay, let's put it at the front of the stage. No one had ever done that before. Even in the Blue Caps picture, they're behind the singer, the band.
Yeah.
So, but we had all these gigs and we just played every week, 5 shows a week, really, and we had plenty of time to experiment and do all this. So we tried various, put this, put that there. Why it's the way it is, because I'm left-handed, and Brian would jump on the drums. So that's why I have the drums on the right side of the stage, because if he jumped on the drums, me being left-handed, he would have to climb over this. He couldn't do it. So there's a wacky method to the madness, seeming the random thing. We had thought about all this.
It's amazing. And talk to me about how that ended up eventually getting, Brian, of course, you gave up your other bands. He gave up the Bloodless Pharaohs. And here it is, you, Lee Rocker, Brian Setzer. Eventually this thing happens where, things are changing. In England, Blondie becomes huge before they're even discovered here in America. You end up going to the UK to get signed, but tell me how that happened and these stories about the Rolling Stones discovering you and all this other stuff. I want to know.
We were continuing on this same path, playing around Long Island, getting very good at it. We had our act down, and we could all play, and we had, it wasn't as haphazard as it might have. I mean, we were kind of arguing on stage, jumping on the drums, bumping into each other, but it was very, we had it down. And we continued doing the same thing, but with the Stray Cats, we would go into the city every now and again, do Max's Kansas City, CBGB's, a few of those clubs, but you could only really do those once a month because they were afraid about your draw getting diluted, right?
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of other places on Long Island that were kind of proper music venues, Speaks, My Father's Place, OBI, Pastimes Pub. I'm trying to think of a bunch.
I remember the commercials for My Father's Place.
Yeah,
it was like a kid in Jersey, so
certain circuit.
Yeah,
and they would have auditions on Monday nights, and we used to keep Mondays free and go to these big rock clubs and audition. And my 3, 4, 5 times the Stray Cats would turn. Could you imagine turning the Stray Cats down? For me, I try to make believe that I don't know what it is, right? And I see a picture of it or I see a clip of it, and I say, holy mackerel. I like to think that I would be able to A&R that even if I was blind and deaf, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's such a no-brainer. So believe it or not, in that time, this would have been 1979. It wasn't even new wave. It was too weird. It wasn't punk. It wasn't country. It wasn't really anything that they could put their finger on, which now, 100 years later, is something that I'm quite proud of. If you want to explain something, you say, well, it's a little bit punk, it's a little bit country, but they crank it up a little bit more. There's a lot of jazz influence in it. These guys can play. They really have a strong look, but it's not. You know what you say now? You say it's kind of like the Stray Cats.
Yeah, you do.
And you know exactly what somebody's talking about.
They're talking about your band. That's how they feel about it.
It's become an adjective.
And you became, the Rockabilly revival was unbelievable because right after that, there were the Polecats, there was Matchbox, there were all these other bands, a lot of UK bands.
So we went to England on no good advice or no good intel or nothing. We would get NME, Melody Maker, 3-4 months late from like the import record store that you have to be. So by the time we got it, we just thought, this is England. Wow, this is cool. It seemed like everybody dresses up. Everybody is a punk or a mod or a rude boy or a ska boy or really we know now. Still, it's 1/100th of 1% of the population
Yeah,
who
exactly.
is into rock and roll at all, and then gets stressed up, etc. But since we were living in this world in Massapequa through this,
Oh, you really had one of those magazines or, things like we saw through the...
sure.
Yeah, because of that period of time.
No MTV, obviously, and all that stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't...
and
There was...
what was on Don Kirshner's Midnight
and
Special, all these great
in
things,
concert.
but there was nothing particularly rockabilly. We were kind of making it up as we went along because we liked The Clash and we liked Gene Vincent. Okay, let's wear pink peg pants with a spiky belt. Like, we were kind of making it up as we went along. So we eventually said, nothing's kind of happening here. We could always come back. No, let's go to England. It seems like maybe it can go there, and I don't even know really what we thought. You'd walk off the plane and you'd be handed a contract. We didn't really know. So we went to England, one-way tickets, got off the plane, and kind of said, now what? And then you said it was a good idea. No, you said it was a good idea. You said it was a good idea. Three Stooges.
Yeah.
So we kind of kicked around. We had, a couple $100, which that went for about a week. We got into the center of town, Piccadilly Circus. That wasn't a movie. Like, we kind of went into the middle of town, paid for a hotel a few nights, and then found ourselves homeless.
Yeah.
And really, we just kicked around. We slept outside. We were homeless people with like pink jackets. And we started to get the newspaper and see what gig was there. Oh, we've heard of this person. Oh, they're kind of famous, and just go hang around gigs at the Marquee and Dingwalls. And there was a circuit of pubs. There were rock pubs in England. The Greyhound, the Golden Lion. There was maybe 5, 6, 7 pub rock joints. Parties that we would hear about just by being on the street. And we started hanging around, somehow getting ourselves to these places. And we knocked on enough doors. Fast forward, this would have been June. Fast forward to, say, about August into September. The joints that we've been bugging everyone finally had a couple openings. Okay, these guys, you can go on 4 o'clock in the afternoon next Thursday. And we would tell everyone that we ran into at the backstage door at all the places. Finally, we had a couple opportunities to play. And the people who were on the scene, who've been dealing with us at this point, well, we better go see these guys from New York. Either they'll go home, maybe they'll be terrible, and they'll shut up. Maybe they'll be good. Nobody knew. So we were now in a position that we were in control of our own destiny. So we go, we play. There's 10 people, 4 o'clock in the afternoon at some pub. And we did the whole thing. Jumped on the drums, jumped off the drums, spun the bass, stood on our heads, did the whole thing. There was 10 people there. The 10 people were Joe Strummer, Chrissy Hine, Lemmy, Captain Sensible, Glenn Matlock. Chrissy Hine had brought Ray Davies second or third time. So that's what it was. And then the Scenesters, and the some of the Hells Angels. That's who we used to hang around 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the music pubs. And then, of course, it's, holy mackerel, who are these guys? We've never seen anything like it. They're American. That's those same guys that are hanging around all the time That was us. So a lot of it was aided by then the music press, which you remember. There was 4 or 5 newspapers every month.
Yeah,
It was
you had Sounds,
NME, Melody Maker, Sound
Maker,
Record
right,
Meter.
yeah.
Exactly. So they needed content all the time. So the next time Strummer is doing an interview, what have you been up to, Joe? Well, I saw this band from New York last week at Dingwalls, and they were on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were amazing. The same with when Matlock's talking. The same when Ray Davies says, what are you doing? There's a new Kinks album coming out. Yeah, but first let me tell you about this band I went and saw.
Yeah.
And it kind of happened like that. So
Yeah.
it happened like that, and then the clubs, they need people. How can we get people here at 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Okay, let's say this band that we gave a little review to, they played, and it was a groundswell like that. And then it took a few weeks, but the news got to the Rolling Stones, and we played at a place called The Venue, Victoria Station. By this time, we had advanced to playing at night,
Yeah.
8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So the Stones had a table. All of them were there, right in front of the stage.
Rolling Stones are sitting there and they're just checking right in front. Which is
Loved
great.
it.
Yeah.
And we were very confident because we had been doing this in New York, like I said, for a year, 5 nights a week, 4 sets a night. We were very good at it. So when someone said, we had Rock This Town, we had Stray Cat Strut, when we were there, we had written Runaway Boys because we knew that if something happens here, we knew that we needed a song that wasn't like a dusty sounding record. As much as we love old, lo-fi rockabilly records, you needed to have something that was
Popping.
modern.
Yeah.
That would be loud on the radio. Even though we didn't know what that was, we instinctively knew that's what we needed. So we wrote Runaway Boys and added that into the set. And when the Stones come, when there was paparazzi type things, the day after that, that's when it goes from the weekly music papers into the national paper.
So now it's
it was
like in
the
the
Daily,
Sun and in Daily Mirror.
it was in Record Mirror
Yeah.
one week, and then the next day it's in the Daily Mirror.
Yeah.
When it was Lady Di opening a bridge and, politics and entertainment, it was national newspaper. So that's when they got really interested, they meaning the industry. And at one of those original gigs, Dave Edmunds was there.
Yeah.
And I can't even say for sure that any of us knew Dave Edmunds. If someone had played me a few records, I would have said, "Oh yeah, I think I've heard that one."
I hear you knocking. You probably
that would
knew
have been
from
the
when you were a
one
kid.
that we would have heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was at the gig, and there was at this point there was a bunch of labels always coming, vying for it, and we had to go with somebody. The Stones wanted to do it, and they were beautiful and very excited to get them. That's when they had Rolling Stones Records, was still a working label. And they wanted to produce it. They wanted to be on their label, but it was very hard to reorganize that original, everyone being together. And for us, it was TikTok because we were still kind of homeless, couch surfing, and we didn't really still have anywhere to live. And we liked taking the meetings with all the different people because they would get lunch for us.
Yeah.
So,
you lived on
like
those
we were
meals
still,
when the record companies were recording you. Right?
We still waited till someone looked away, and then we took the rolls.
Yeah,
and put it
exactly.
in our pocket. It really was, and so it all lined up that Edmunds wanted to do it. He came to us, and he was awesome. He said all the right stuff. He invited us to his home, and he lived in West London on everyone knows London, New Kings Road, which is further west, and he brought us to his home, and he had like everything in England is like a little bit smaller, you know. So if you go to someone's home, it's a little smaller, not like you and me where there's a finished basement. You remember someone's finished basement? The guy might have had a ping pong table, and his dad had a dartboard and a bar.
Yeah, exactly.
Edmunds' one was like that, but just smaller.
Yeah.
He had a small jukebox and a small English pool table that had like half this.
Yeah.
He had it down in his basement. We went to dinner. Leslie, his wife at the time, made us dinner. We go downstairs. We're goofing off, and he had a little jukebox. And Brian and I saw he had "The Races On" by George Jones,
right? Which he covered Dave Edmunds eventually.
Which we did later with him.
With him, yes, you guys.
And we said, "This is the right guy."
Yeah.
And we met the label that we'd become closest to, who was Arista Records, Simon Potts, Tarquin Gotch, two A&R guys. Still speak to them, love them. And it was a go.
Yeah.
We accepted Arista. They accepted the deal with the stipulation that it was Edmunds, and it was like the package was now made, and we went in within maybe a week or so and cut that first album.
That's amazing.
And then we're on the road by Christmas. All of this was, we left in June, and when they froze the charts for Christmas, we had the number 9 record was Runaway Boys.
Which is unbelievable.
It was a busy 6 months.
Yeah, that's incredible. And then, of course, in the Secession, you released, of course, those other songs you already had, Stray Cat Strut and Rock This Town, which were also massive hits. And obviously, so tell me about when it finally it translated and got back to your home country here in America, because, it was one of those things where I bought 2 import albums, right? And I loved it because there were songs on there, obviously, that combined. And that would happen a lot back in that period of like new wave and punk and new indie stuff that was out. Is when the American albums would come out, they would combine the first 2 releases and take whatever song. So you didn't get Crawl Up and Die and things like that I loved. But I still thought it was just so cool that I was starting to see you guys, people were finding out who you were, and MTV started playing you. Talk to me about how that all happened. And
that, when you sign a record contract in England, you're signing it as if you're English in a funny way, even though we were Americans living in England. And now I know it's like a common practice. It's an U.S. record deal, and the X stands for accept, not
Yeah.
for. And because labels to take on the responsibility of breaking a record in the States and all that is a big undertaking, I think, because it's
Yeah.
so big in the States. So we signed for, it was Europe and the rest of the world, and very quickly we did 2, 3, 4 tours of Europe. We went to Amsterdam to do a TV show, and then came back the same night and did a gig somewhere in England, and France the same thing, Germany the same thing. So we spent a lot of time in Europe first, and you would make a video. I think the first couple we made were really, the outlets for them was if you couldn't be in Sweden or couldn't be in Spain or couldn't be in Germany on Saturday, when you would do the American Bandstand or the Solid Gold or Top of the Pops in England of each country, you couldn't always be there. Because
Right.
we would spend months and months just going and miming those songs on those kind of programs. And every country had one, and they were very like American Bandstand for every
Netherlands
country,
type
really.
story,
So
everywhere.
when you couldn't be there, they would still want something to show, so you would have a rock video. Not just us, everyone had it, And we did those first couple, that's what they were used for, because there
Yeah.
wasn't any dedicated channels. You couldn't be in Germany that day. Okay, they're gonna play Runaway Boys on Das Fledermaus on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
So so that's what they were used for, and we had done a couple of them, and then we went a couple times. We went to Japan, Australia, because that was part of the original record deal. Europe, Australia, Japan. And on one of the times that we went to Japan or Australia, we stopped in the States because of just how far it was. We stopped in L.A., and we were going to do a club show, because we would do every now and again a show to make the money to pay for the excess luggage or
Yeah.
kind of thing, whatever. There was a label and all that, and it was fine, but we stopped in L.A. for some reason on the way to Japan, and they booked us a show at the Roxy.
Yeah.
Great. It's a famous place. I'd never been to L.A. before. We had been around the world a couple times, but
Yeah.
not too much in the States, because there was no reason, because we didn't have a record here. Always in the back of our heads to come back. We show up to play in L.A., and there was a line around the block. What's going on? The long and short of it was, it had been getting played on import radio
Yeah.
here in L.A. on K-Rock
Yeah.
by Flo and Eddie,
Yeah. The guys from the Turtles. They're great.
who had
Howard and,
met us
Mark.
in Holland or Germany, some wacky place. We met them at the airport, and they liked us. We were all from New York. We had a good laugh. They came back to L.A. and got it on an import, and they started playing it. And I think we were included with, say, those English bands, Adam and the Ants,
Yeah.
Duran Duran, who was ever coming out the 81
Yeah.
from England. So it was a different sound. It was a popular import. We had no idea,
Yeah.
which I don't think these days you could be popular in a country and not know about it. But
Yeah.
we were very popular in Los Angeles and didn't know about it. So one show at the Roxy, it turned into the long show. I think we did maybe a week. 3 shows turned into 5, and it was a matinee show and an evening show.
That's how many tickets you guys were selling. People wanted to see you guys, and that's unbelievable. That's
I just didn't
amazing.
leave. I'm staying.
Yeah, you're like,
So-
hey, I like Los Angeles. The weather's great. I'm
I've
gonna
just
stay
never
here with
left.
my
I've really never gotten too far from the Roxy since then.
Yeah.
And we continued to, and then about a year after that, Gary Gersh from EMI found the record on an import, and Arista, who was the home label, had the opportunity to just they owned it for the States, and for some reason they chose, which I still don't know, never had a problem with anybody. They decided not to. So Gary Gersh from EMI, he thought this is a great idea, and got in touch with us, and EMI purchased the rights to the first 2 records
Yeah.
that were on Arista, and they made a compilation of the first 2
Built
with
for
one new
Speed.
track, which was Built for Speed, which one of those other wacky times, one of those times we came to LA, we found ourselves by ourselves loose in RCA Annex Studio over in Hollywood. It's over by where the Formosa. It's over in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was a studio that Elvis recorded in. Ricky Nelson. We found the studio. It was a vintage studio. And somehow we were let loose in there.
Yeah.
3 of us and some old engineer guy. And we recorded the title track for Built for Speed on all old analog gear. And so Built for Speed, the American release, became a compilation, which was chosen by the powers that be, from the first 2 records and with the song that we recorded in L.A. by ourselves.
Yeah.
And that became, and we just got in the bus.
And that was it. And so tell me when you realized all of a sudden people were falling in love with the band. MTV was playing the videos. You guys exploded. And when did you realize that things were happening everywhere here?
Well, I guess when you start hearing it on the radio, for sure, on regular radio. And MTV has a lot to do with not just us, but I think it has a lot to do with everybody. I think it's a major story for the latter part of the 20th century,
yes,
really, of
just
kind of like a historical thing, because it really did open up varying ways of thought, really, how people looked at rock and roll, how you'll never look at music the same way again. It's true, you know?
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful thing to be part of. It was very small in the beginning, and everyone was very, very close. You were there. I mean, all the original VJs, Martha, J.J. Allen, Mark, Nina, we were all friendly.
Yeah.
And everyone was into the... because when they first started, believe it or not, they needed content.
Yeah.
There wasn't really that much stuff.
And they used a lot of it from the UK because we're used to making videos for the same reasons that you brought up. It's amazing. The story is they make it for the other territories, and because they needed content. First, the American record companies didn't want to make videos. And then people were smart, like Tom Petty and a few other people were like, hey, wait a minute, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. ZZ Top, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people eventually got into it.
And they already had a couple of ours.
Yeah.
It was like part of the deal kind of thing. And I think the Stray Cats were kind of tailor-made for it without...
I mean, you were such a visual band.
Yeah. And we were of the right age, and it was of the right... I mean, I can imagine coming home from school and someone turning on MTV and saying, holy mackerel, look at that. I can imagine it.
And
it makes sense to me.
It's true. And it was amazing because for me, like a guy who was, coming out of like high school and college radio, spinning in like nightclubs. I mean, I had so many friends who wanted to be you guys or look like you. Like people were like it started a whole thing. It was incredible, and I love to see that.
That's maybe when I knew it was kind of big. I mean, we had some success and we met a lot of people and all that, but when it became the exact thing for a minute, that's when I knew. Like when the mannequins at Macy's had pompadours and were wearing kind of like bowling shirts.
Yeah.
And that was the exact en vogue. It wasn't new wave, it wasn't rockabilly, it was mainstream.
Yeah.
For like a minute there. And I don't know if without the Stray Cats that would have happened.
Yeah. I would say probably not, to be honest with you. You guys were such a big, important part of that all the way around. It's amazing. And so, and you guys obviously did so many great things. You've reunited, you've done different things, but you played with so many great people. And tell me about that too, Jim, because, having played in the different bands, you ended up playing with some of the guys who were inspired by you, like even guys that were in the Polecats, right? Like the English band. They did that great song, Make a Circuit with Me, which was awesome.
Tim Polecat's a very, very dear friend of mine. And we did a band called 13 Cats around here in L.A. It was in the 90s. That was one of the things that we did. Made one album.
Yeah.
It started maybe in the mid part of the 80s when the Stray Cats everyone wanted to make a solo album.
Yeah. And Phantom Rocker and Slick was one that you guys did with
we were
the
in
great
a spot
Earl Slick.
where we had to make a solo album, and we met Earl Slick, who had just got finished with David Bowie, and then he had done right after that Julian Lennon, who's still my dearest pal. These are still all people that are our pals.
Absolutely.
And we met Slick from Julian, and we needed a guitar player. We're going to make an album for EMI because it was an EMI thing at that point. Because Julian and David were both on EMI, so that's who you saw at the office, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Slick got approved. Okay, here's the bread you needed to make, and became the first Phantom Rock and Slick album, which was a nice one, really. I quite liked that record. Keith Richard played on it. We saw him at a party under the right circumstances. He agreed. Keith, we got a song that'd be great on. Okay,
Yeah.
man.
That's so great.
So
And,
he came and did it.
that Earl Slick, that was funny. When I was a kid, I discovered him playing with Bowie on that David Live album,
Brilliant.
which was his playing was incredible on that record. He was so great, and then that's
and he's a
how
New
I
York guy,
discovered it.
Slick. He's a back east guy, and his dad was on the cops, and my dad's on the firemen. So we would, when we were both, the sons who wore leopard skin jackets, and our dads were tough guys. It was funny.
Yeah.
So we got along very well. Slick. I stay in touch with him all the time. I love the guy. So that's what we did for a couple of years, and then it was time to start doing the Stray Cats again, and we did that for another 4 or 5 years, and then Brian made his orchestra record, and he had a success with that, and okay, you have to do something else for a little while. And that's when I just went to the people that I organically knew, who were my friends, Lemmy being one of them, who was at those original shows where there was 10 people. Lemmy was one of them.
So you've been friends with Lemmy from you were friends with Lemmy from Motorhead from like the get-go.
Yeah, from those original Stray Cat shows. He was a fan of, he loved Buddy Holly, and the sappier the ballad, the better for Lem, and Little Richard.
He wrote "Mama, I'm Coming Home" for Ozzy, so it's like it makes sense, right? You know what I mean? It's amazing.
He kind of knew more about it than he and Edmunds really knew more about it than anyone I had ever known. I knew Gene Vincent and Johnny Burnett, and I knew all the greatest hits kind of thing. Lem, he was really deep. One of the first times I met him was at that first Stray Cats show, and he asked me about a certain Gene Vincent song, and I didn't know it, and he was almost mad at me. So he brought me back to this flat that he had, was in a basement bunker that he shared with a few of the Angels guys, and he went through all of his stuff. I'm sure you watch his documentary. He had a flat like that in England before, and he eventually threw all this stuff over his, and he found a reel-to-reel of this Gene Vincent song that he had recorded off the radio back when he was a kid, and somehow he still had it. So he played it for me. Okay, I heard the Gene Vincent BBC recording now, and we just stayed friends. And then when he moved to L.A., he happened to move on the street next to me where my joint backed up to his building. So it was funny, and we just always stayed friends. And he had that Motorhead schedule, but he liked to they had a few months off, usually January through March, and that's when every year he wanted to go play rockabilly. So we had Head Cat, which was Lem, myself, and Danny Harvey from the Rock Cats, another original rock and roll guy. And
I saw them open for the Clash back in the day.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it was all the same small gang of people, really.
Yeah.
And Lem just loved that music, and for him it was like bucket list kind of stuff to do these songs. For me, I was a little bit spoiled because this is my job, and for him to do Buddy Holly, to do Gene Vincent, to do Johnny Burnett, to do original Sun Sessions Elvis songs, for him it was bucket list, a dream come true, and I was happy to help him do that. And we made a couple albums and had some nice gigs and a few nice tours, and it just kind of another legit thing that was really just from an organic shared love of this music by everybody.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love that. I mean, you've done so many cool things and got so many great friends. I love that when I went to see the other night, because it was great. You were there. It was like a wedding, a celebration for you and Jenny V. Who's, Jenny's also in Eagles of Death Metal and has her own stuff going on, and she's great. Your wife and I love her. But it was amazing because Jeff Skunk Baxter from the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan was playing with you all night, and he's like your friend for years, right? Your neighbors. Tell me about that.
I was an original Steely Dan head. Like as a kid, when I took jazz lessons and wanted to,
I love Steely Dan.
Yeah. Me too. The first 3 albums are
my God,
undeniable.
Yeah, you can't. Can't Buy a Thrill, Countdown to Ecstasy, Pretzel Logic. I even love Katie Lied. Those 4 are my favorites.
Totally.
And I love that stuff, man, start to finish.
I would practice along to those records, and we had a success. We knew a lot of people at this point. We were people in our own rights, But I had never met anyone from Steely Dan, and it was a very big influence on me, like the Beatles were, and the Stones, and Elvis, and Gene Vincent, and Johnny Burnett, and Chuck Berry, and like all the cats. But Steely Dan was in that mix for me as a drummer.
Yeah.
Jim Hodder, Jeff Porcaro, they were still
Yeah.
two of my favorite drummers, and so, but I'd never met them. So the story is that Dave Edmunds, Brian Setzer, and myself are hanging out in New York City, Parker Meridian Hotel, 57th Street. We were during the making of Rant and Rave.
Yeah.
And I went outside for some reason to go to the deli or to get some air. For some reason, I went outside, bumped into someone on the sidewalk. I had my New York head back on. Hey, man, watch where you're going.
Yeah.
And I look up, it's Jeff Baxter.
Yeah.
And the first thing I said, oh, I can't believe it's you. And he recognized me a little bit. I knew him more, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, you got to come upstairs with me and meet the other guys.
Yeah.
They said, well, my next appointment is not for an hour. Okay. He must have known I wasn't crazy. I was genuine. He came upstairs with me at the Parker Meridian Hotel. I knocked on the door where Dave and Brian were. They answered the phone. I say, look what I did. I found Jeff Baxter on the street and brought him up to the room.
Yeah.
We all got along. It was all great. Later that night or the next day, because of course we stayed in touch, we went to the Peppermint Lounge. Brian, Dave, Jeff played bass and I played drums, and we just did a little gig.
Yeah.
We did about 5-7 songs, the ones that we all knew. And I think MTV turned up, and it was on the local radio station. And like before we knew it, there's like 100 people at the Peppermint Lounge. And that was 1982, 83, and I've just stayed friends with Jeff ever since. And a few years ago, I moved on to street that he lives on. Oh, the house next door is available. I said, well, I'll move there.
Yeah.
So we're neighbors and friends. He's my son's godfather. He's very close with my wife, and it's just beautiful life.
Your son's name is TJ. Is that?
Yes, my son's name's TJ. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was amazing too. Like people always knew you were married. Your first wife
Yes,
was Britt Eklund, right?
Yeah.
Who of course, we all know her from when we were like younger kids from Rod Stewart, of course, and then you marrying you. We were like, Slim Jim's he rocks. And he's you know what I mean. It was, but it's so cool. And your son, man, it's just great.
He's great. My son. He's a great drummer. He's just recently moved to Sweden with his girlfriend, and it's a whole nother generation.
Yeah.
And, he and Jeff are very close, and like we saw you the other night, we just did a gig. Jenny and I got married a few years ago, and we were how the world is. We were unable to have a nice party. We got married over Zoom.
Yeah.
Because we were supposed to have a wedding and do a party, and then
you got married over Zoom just because of the
everything
because of
changed,
the pandemic.
and there was nowhere to go to do it. So we got a call from a judge saying we have to honor all the licenses. So the way to do it, you want to get married? Yeah, of course. You still want to get married? Yeah, of course. Okay. Call back the next morning on your laptop. I got TJ to be the witness, and Jenny and I got married over Zoom. It was about 3 years ago. And then when everything opened up again, everyone immediately had to honor all their things for going back on tour. And so this was the first chance that we really had to do what we wanted to do for 3 years, to go have a party, invite you, invite the old Cat Club gang, Gilby Clark, Dizzy Reed, Eric Dover, Matt Locke came and played.
Yeah. Tony Canal from No Doubt.
Oh, Tony Canal, Stevie Salas.
Yeah. Fred Armisen was there. Everybody was hanging out.
Green Day, our whole gang was there.
Yeah.
And then Eagles of Death Metal played first with an amazing new lineup. They were our special guests, and because we're all very, very close. And then Jesse Hughes acted as the minister to our vows. We redid the vows,
which was
beautiful.
Everything
was already legal schmiegel. We've got a license.
Yeah, it was so cool.
Ago.
You guys had the photo booth. Me and my girlfriend went up and took our pictures in the photo booth, of course, too.
It was
great. I mean,
it was fantastic. All on Sunset Strip. It's really like where they dropped me off 100 years ago. We're still doing the same stuff.
The wedding celebration there. It's incredible. I love that. And Jim, I love your passion for music. It's one of my favorite things is when you and I run into each other. I love just talking to you about it. But I want to talk about, first of all, let's talk about the new Barnstormers, which is really cool because, we're going to play Real Wild Child, your cover of that classic song. That it's interesting because was the original done by an Australian artist and then done by like Iggy Pop did it, but it was done by a bunch of different people.
The original version of I think it's called
Real Wild One.
Yes, it was
like
Jerry Lee Lewis, I think.
Yeah, there were a few different versions of it. I knew that for a fact. And then Iggy's version was so great.
And the Australian version was by a guy named Johnny O'Keefe.
That's the one.
Every country, you know, like we were just talking about, has their own TV show, like American Bandstand.
Yeah.
Every country you can name of has their one guy that was right after Elvis Presley.
Yeah, everybody had to have their own version of Elvis.
Say Johnny Halliday.
Yeah.
The British had Cliff Richard. There was each country had a guy that was could sing. He was on TV,
and he was good looking, so the girls loved him
for maybe local release or and the Australian version of that was a guy named Johnny O'Keefe. Now, one of three of my famous underground friendships, which really shouldn't be if you know me, started when the first time. Well, this is even before when we were in England. Among those local gigs that we did in England, where there was 10 people in the audience, some of the people that were there were guys that were in Squeeze.
Yeah.
And one being Jules Holland.
Yeah.
Who's my friend for 40 years.
Yeah, and I love Squeeze, and they're such a great band. And of course, Jules Holland, legendary, incredible player,
maybe
but
the
also,
best.
and host of one of the greatest English music TV shows of all time. Later with Jules Holland, that everybody
and really the best
knows.
piano player when it comes down
Unreal.
to it. So he and I had always talked about someday let's do a record together. Okay, sounds great. We talked for 40 years. The first time the Stray Cats went to Australia in 1981, I meet Jimmy Barnes, who, for those of you who don't know, Jimmy Barnes is the biggest rock star in Australia. I think he's had like
most
17 number ones in Australia.
He's definitely one of the most famous Australians that people really don't know in America. I mean, they know Easy Beats, AC/DC, Bee Gees.
He was involved with that whole gang, and he's that original guy in that school of, I guess you would say his voice is kind of like Bon Scott, maybe.
Yeah.
You ask Jimmy what key is something, he'll go, what key is that? Well, let me figure that one out. And he's just got that voice, that rock voice. He had a band called Cold Chisel.
Yeah.
It was in the 70s that were maybe right around or even a little bit before, but right around the same time as AC/DC.
Yeah.
Is that real Aussie rock. And, of course, all these guys, if you're around for more than 10 minutes, you realize all of these people, whether it's your Beatles or your Stones or your Cold Chisel or your AC/DC, who do they love? They love Little Richard. They love Jerry Lee Lewis. They love Eddie Cochran. They love Gene Vincent. They love Buddy Holly.
Everybody loves the original, the pioneers, the kings of rock.
Exactly right. So the Stray Cats did our first tour of Australia in 1981, and one of the people who came to the shows in Australia was Jimmy Barnes.
Yeah.
Who came with a 62 Corvette that he just parked in front of the club, and he gave it to Brian and I to use while we were in England.
That's amazing.
Somehow we didn't crash it. Driving on the wrong side of the road, we gave it back to him in one piece.
That's amazing.
But he and I, since then, of course, we've talked about someday we got to do a rockabilly record. We've been talking about this between Jules and Barnsey and me 80 years talking about it. Chris Chaney, who plays guitar in Barnstormers, is a little bit younger. He's in a band called The Living End, who was a really hot, shredding Aussie band. And Chaney is one of those people, like, say, Brian Setzer, like Glenn Tilbrook, like he's one of those guys that can sing and play anything.
Yeah.
There's not that many of them. He's really that good. And he's a little bit younger than us. His band started when his sister was supposed to be babysitting Chris. She snuck out of the house with him in tow to go see the Stray Cats on one of those early tours.
Yeah.
He heard it. He was affected. He loved it. He heard the Stray Cats. He heard the class. He wanted to play guitar. And he practiced a lot.
Yeah,
and he's of that level where he's that kind of musician. So he knew Barnsey, and we've been making this plan for 40 years almost. And it was all set to go with Australian record producer extraordinaire Kevin Shirley, who you might have met at the Whiskey the other night.
Yeah,
he's our
I
pal.
had great stories. We were catching up from the last time I saw him.
He did Rush.
Yeah,
he does Iron
Maiden.
He did
Rush, Iron Maiden.
He did Bonamasso's last couple of records.
Yeah, and he's the guy who worked in the studio with Jimmy Page doing all the How the West Was Won stuff.
He's
which
that
is the
guy.
best live Zeppelin stuff ever.
He's that
He's got
guy.
the greatest stories too.
So our plan was we're all connected now. We're going to finally make this dream come true. Jules, Barnsey, Cheney, myself, Kevin Shirley at the controls. We've been talking about it for 50 years. Let's do it. It was all down to it. We had the flights booked. We're going to Australia, window or aisle seat. Eagles of Death Metal, we're going to tour Australia. So it was great. I would work during the week, and then on the weekends take off, go hang out with Jenny and Jesse and go to their gigs. It was all set. Beautiful time. Of course, everything changes. Nobody goes anywhere for a while.
That pandemic was,
Kevin Shirley, who's the star of the show, says, well, what does this mean? This doesn't mean we have to stop. What are you talking about? Leave it to me. Stay by the phone. The long and short of it. Shirley would record a click track and a tempo and a very rough bass part of the songs that we were going to record. He sent them to me. I went to Gilby Clark's house, recorded the drums, send them back to Kevin Shirley, which now has the click track, the light bass part, and the drums. Shirley would then send it to Jules. Jules would record his bit, send it back to Shirley. So now you've got the piano, you've got the click track, you've got the drum track, and we made a record this way.
Yeah.
Sent back to, all through Kevin Shirley. Did their parts, you send it back to Shirley. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I just, it's a Mac computer, just keep hitting buttons and eventually you'll get it right.
Yeah.
We wound up, we made an album through all this. Finally, Jimmy sang it when they were all complete. It took about a year, track at a time. And so we made and we did a Zoom call every week.
Yeah.
With everyone's progress. And it's just come out under the band name Barnstormers.
Yeah. It's coming out on May 23rd, right?
That's when the album comes out. Yeah. They released
2 songs.
The first single was called Johnny's Gone, that was written by a guy named Don Wilson, who was the original guitar player with Jimmy in Cold Chisel, who had a great song. Number 3 in the Australian charts.
Yeah.
So we made a record with the most old-fashioned guys in the most modern way, and it's having success now. So when everything's ready, the plan is to go back and do a tour of Australia.
That'd be great.
With the whole gang. And since then, I was in England. I got together with Jules, hung out with him. Chris was back, so it's all kind of, eventually we're going to all be in the same room.
That'd be great.
And then we'll play a gig.
We so look forward to that, man. I mean, I love that.
That's what we've been doing. That's the whole.
Well, those first 2 songs are great. The taste of what this record is going to sound like,
I would have swore it was 4 guys in the same room.
Yeah.
And I guess everyone's done enough that they were the 4 guys in the same room that you were able to kind of conjure it up, really, and just kind of have that.
You've been that band in the garage. You've been that band in the room.
Emotion.
So every one of you guys have started from that place, so you were able to bring that.
So now everything's back on. We've been doing gigs again. Jenny's doing Eagles of Death Metal. They start their European tour in July.
Yeah.
And she's made a record. She did one song that's out that in Small World stuff. Chris Cheney, Barnstormers living in. She wrote a song with Chris Cheney. That I was just happy to put everyone together again. This is what I do. I introduce everyone. So my beautiful rockin' wife and my beautiful rockin' friend made a record together.
That's great. Absolutely,
really is.
I love having you here. Just you coming in and telling all these stories today is the best. And
there's still all going on.
Yeah, it is. I'm excited.
You and I hang out. We see each other all the time.
Yeah, we do. We do hang out. It's the best. I love it. For me, it's one of those things where. Are both total music heads, music geeks, music whatever you want to call it. We love music. We love rock and roll so much. And, from every era, we just listen to so many different things, but it's so important. You and I, you're the guy that knows everything I talk about. Like, we talk about the Johnny Burnett Trio and the 7 inches on choral. Exactly. It's like that kind of, and I love that, man.
Some of them had Paul Burleson on guitar, but some Jody Maphis played guitar on too, but he wasn't in the photographs. Right?
Yeah,
it's all that.
So I love all that. It's the way it is. But I'm excited about the Barnstormers gigs. Will be great.
Oh, the Barnstormers gonna be. We're gonna, I think, organically see each other in England over the summer because Barnsy's going to a family wedding in Scotland because his family was Scottish. They immigrated
just like AC/DC
to Australia.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Jules will be there. I'm there on a gig of my own, a trio gig that I'm doing. And Cheney is doing something with Living End, so we're all going to be, as old-fashioned as we're all going to be in London, which seems to be one of those places that it's all roads lead to. So, I mean, we'll be in the same room, and then hopefully we'll hatch a part 2 to the plan.
That sounds great. Slim Jim, I just want to thank you for coming and doing the show today. So great to have you on, and love hearing the stories. I love that you're getting to share them with everybody who's listening and watching, because that's the story. The stories are so great about how you guys started out, like just the true spirit and essence of rock and roll and what it is, because you love to do it, and that's how it all happened.
Well, that's like you, man.
You know,
I mean, if we're both 17 and you say be in music your whole life, you're going to be 75 years old.
Yeah.
Being on the radio and playing the drums.
Yeah.
Sign in blood, dotted line, sell, soul.
Yeah, we would have done it because we're so grateful to be alive. I mean, I would have definitely. It's amazing. I think about it.
We didn't have to sign anything over.
We didn't. We could actually be,
It happened organically.
It did. It's fantastic. I'm so grateful to still be going and doing it, man.
Beautiful to see you, man.
Yeah, it's great to have you. It's Slim Jim Phantom, everybody. The new record is coming out May 23rd. The Barnstormers. Thank you so much, Jim, for hanging out with us today.
Yeah. And we'll get you Jenny's record, Out for Blood.
Yeah, I'm going to play that on the show, too.
And I've got a new one that we just did. It's called Speed of Sound.
Yeah.
Which we've been playing on Underground Garage.
Yeah. Get me all that
song
stuff.
In the world this week. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds great. I look forward to it.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much, Sam. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much for watching us on KLOS New and Approved.